Hello learners, you're watching video on Hermione Squad, a group of literary students initiative.
If you are new to this channel, please do like, share and subscribe.
Renaissance period. Chaucer's age was followed by the period of Renaissance. Renaissance is the name commonly applied to the period of European history following the Middle Ages. It is usually said to have begun in Italy in the late 14th century and to have continued in Italy and other countries of Western Europe through the 15th and 16th centuries. It is the period marking the transition from Middle Ages to modernity, so it is also known as the early modern period. The English Renaissance was a cultural and artistic movement in England dating from the late 15th to early 17th century. Though Renaissance began in 1453, its effects on English life and literature was felt after 1500. For this reason, it is generally accepted that the Renaissance period began with the beginning of 16th century and continued till the Restoration in 1660. And this period is called the Renaissance period because Renaissance spirit was the main driving force that categorized the literature of this time. In this period of Renaissance, the art of painting, sculpture, architecture, music, and literature reached an eminence which is not exceeded by any civilization in any age. As in most of Northern Europe, England saw little of these developments until more than a century later. The Renaissance developments came into England in the 16th century and did not have its flowering until the Elizabethan and Jacobean periods. And the Elizabethan era is usually regarded as the highest peak of English Renaissance. In England, this period begins with war, unrest, and almost chaos. It concludes with a settled dynasty, a reformed religion, and the people united and progressive. And here prepares the scene for the great age to follow. The period of 160 years of Renaissance is subdivided into four shorter ages after the names of the political rulers. Elizabethan Age. This age is named after Queen Elizabeth I, who reigned over England from 1558 to 1603. Elizabethan Age is considered as the most productive period of English Renaissance. Jacobean Age. This age is named after James I, who reigned over England from 1603 to 1625. Carolingian Age. The age is named after Charles I, who reigned over England from 1625 to 1649.
And finally, the Commonwealth period, which was named after the political structure of England during the period from 1649 to 1660 under the rule of Puritan leader Divor Cromwell.
Many attempts have been made to define the Renaissance in a brief statement, as though a single essence underlie the complex features of the intellectual and cultural life of a great variety of European countries over several hundred years. It has been described as the birth of the modern world out of the ashes of the Dark Ages, as the discovery of the world and the discovery of man, and as the era of emergence of untrammeled individualism in life, thought, religion, and art. Furthermore, during the span of time called the Renaissance, it is possible to identify a number of events and discoveries which, beginning approximately in 15th century, clearly effected distinctive changes in the beliefs, reductions in manner of the life of many people in various countries, especially those in the upper and the intellectual classes. Beginning in the 1940s, a number of historians have replaced the term Renaissance with early modern to designate the span from the end of the Middle Ages until late in the 17th century. The latter term looks forward rather than back, emphasizing the degree to which the time, instead of being mainly a rebirth of the classical past, can be viewed in its innovations and intellectual concerns as a precursor of our present time. The innovations during this period may be regarded as putting a strain on the relatively closed and stable world of the great civilization of the latter Middle Ages, when most of the essential and permanent truths about man, God, the universe, religion, and philosophy were held to be well known and permanently established. The full impact of many developments in the Renaissance did not make itself until the Enlightenment in the latter 17th and 18th centuries, but the very fact that they occurred in this period indicates the vitality, the restless curiosity, and the imaginative audacity of many people of the era, whether scholars, thinkers, artists, or adventurers. Renaissance scholars of the classics revived knowledge of the Greek language, discovered and disseminated a great number of Greek manuscripts, and added considerably to the number of Roman authors and works which had been known during the Middle Ages. The result was to open up a sense of vastness of historical past, as well as to enlarge immensely the stock of ideas, materials, literary forms, and styles available to Renaissance writers. In the mid 15th century, the invention of printing on paper made books for the first time cheap and plentiful, and floods of publications, ancient and modern, poured from the presses of Europe to satisfy the demands of expanding population who had learned to read. The rapidity and range of the spread of ideas, discoveries, and types of literature in the Renaissance was made possible by this new technology of printing. The Reformation, led by Martin Luther King, was a successful heresy which struck at the very foundations of the institutionalism of Roman Catholic Church. This early Protestantism was grounded on each individual's inner experience of spiritual struggle and salvation. Faith alone was thought sufficient to save, and salvation itself was regarded as a direct transaction with God in the theatre of individual soul, without the need of intermediation by church, priest, or sacrament. For this reason, Protestantism is sometimes said to have been an extreme manifestation of Renaissance individualism in Northern Europe. In 1492, Christopher Columbus, acting on the persisting and widespread belief in the all-Greek idea that the world is a globe, sailed west to find a new commercial route to the east, only to be frustrated by the unexpected barrier of a new continent. The succeeding explorations of this continent and its native population and its settlement by Europe gave new materials to the literary imaginations.
Most important for English literature, however, was the fact that economic exploitations of the New World, often cruel, oppressive, and devastating to the native people, put England at the center, and so helped establish the commercial prosperity that in England, as in Italy earlier, was a necessary, though not sufficient condition for the development of a vigorous intellectual and artistic life.
The cosmos of medieval astronomy and of medieval Christian theology was Ptolemaic and pictured a stationary earth around which rotated the successive spheres of the moon, the various planets, and then the fixed stars. In 1543, Copernicus published his new hypothesis concerning the astronomic system, in which the center is the Sun, not the Earth, and in which the Sun is only one planet among many planets, all of which revolve around the Sun. This Copernicus theory has led to greater complications within the scheme of the Ptolemaic world picture. Much more important in the long run was the effective opinion of general principles and method of new science developed by the great successors of Copernicus in the late 16th and early 17th centuries. Scholarly humanists recovered, edited, and expounded many ancient texts in Greek and Latin, and so contributed greatly to the store of materials and ideas in the European Renaissance. Typically, Renaissance humanism assumed the dignity and central position of human beings in the universe, emphasized the importance and education of studying classical, imaginative, and philosophical literature, although with emphasis on its moral and practical rather than its aesthetic values. In our time, the term humanist often connotes those thinkers who base truth on human experience and reason, and who base values on human nature and culture, as distinguished from those who regard religious revelations as the warrant for basic truth and values. Poverty of material. Considering the length of the period, the poverty of the output is hard to explain. In the early Renaissance period, there is no English poet of any consequence. The prose writing is thin in quality and in quantity. Decline of poetry. In the early Renaissance period, there was a marked decadence in the style of English poetry. In this period, it grew and hardened into a mechanical and soulless device, for the poets lacked sufficient poetical fire to give it life. There was little trace of real poetical imagination and phrasing, and the actual vocabulary is not striking. Compared with that of Chaucer, these works seemed childish and inept. Many reasons have been advanced to explain this rapid collapse. The most obvious one is the sheer lack of talent. There is nobody to carry on the Chaucerian tradition with any great credit. Also, the pronunciation of English was rapidly changing, and the new race of poets had no requisite skills to modify the old meter to suit the new age. Scottish poetry. Scottish poetry comes late into notice, but it comes with a bound. The poverty and disunion of Scotland, its severance from the intellectual stimulus of English thought, and the dearth of educational facilities all combine to retard its literary development. In Scottish poetry, there is much activity. To a large extent, the Scottish poets were content to imitate the mannerisms of Chaucer, and if it were not for the activities of the Scottish poets, the age would be poor indeed. In one respect, indeed, they carried Chaucer's descriptive allegorical method too far and made their poems lifeless. Development of drama. The popularity of the romance is almost gone. The drama, more suited to the growing intelligence of the time, is rapidly taking on a new importance, a preparation for the great age of Elizabeth. The professional actor and the playwright, owing to the real demand for their services, are making their appearance. The importance of the period. The importance of the time is relayed by its apparent barrenness. In reality, it is a season of healthy fallow, of germination, of rust and recuperation. The literary impulse, slowly awakening, is waiting for the right moment. When the right moment comes, the long period of rust gives the new movement a swift and enduring force.
This is all about Renaissance period. We will be back with our next video on Elizabethan age.